The air in my kitchen was thick with the ghost of a Sunday dinner. The scent of roasted chicken, sweet potato pie, and collard greens still clung to the curtains. It was a familiar ghost, one I had summoned every week for 40 years. But this time it felt different. Felt like a shroud. David, my son, had stood right there, by the counter where I rolled out the dough for the pie crust. His wife, Susan, was beside him, her arms crossed, a thin, pitying smile on her face. They hadn't touched the pie. "Too much sugar, Mom," Susan had said, as if my baking was a personal failing. David had cleared his throat, the way he always did before delivering a verdict. He had the same gestures as his father, but none of the warmth. James would clear his throat before telling a joke. David did it before breaking a piece of your spirit. "Mom," he began, his eyes scanning the room, not me. He looked at the high ceilings, the crown molding James and I had put up ourselves, the slight water stain from the '08 storm that I never had the heart to paint over. He looked at everything but the woman who had birthed him. "This house is too big for you," he said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't a suggestion. It was a statement of fact, a closing argument in a trial I hadn't known I was a part of. "It's time to sell." I remember the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall. It was a wedding gift from my parents. Each tick was a second of my life, a second of the life James and I had built within these walls. Tick. The day we brought David home from the hospital, wrapped in a blue blanket. Tock. The night we held each other in this kitchen and cried when James lost his job at the mill. Tick. The afternoon I taught our granddaughter Imani how to braid dough for challah bread on this very counter. Tock. The clock kept ticking, but for a moment my heart did not. I looked at my hands. They were resting on the worn formica. Veins like rivers on a map, knuckles swollen with arthritis. These hands had changed thousands of diapers, cooked 10,000 meals, wiped away countless tears. They had held my husband's hand as he took his last breath in the room just up the stairs. Now they were just the hands of an old woman in a house that was too big for her. I didn't say anything. I just listened. Susan chimed in, her voice like honey laced with arsenic. "We've found a wonderful place, Esther. Community. It's called Golden Meadows. It's very secure. They have activities. Bingo. And you won't have to worry about a thing. Worry." They spoke of worry as if it were a coat I could just take off. As if my life, my home, my memories were just a collection of worries they needed to manage. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to simplify me. To pack me away in a neat, manageable box labeled Mother. "We could get a great price for this place," David continued, his voice gaining momentum. "The market is hot. We could invest the money for you. Make sure you're taken care of, taken care of." The words echoed in the sudden silence of the room. The clock ticked on, a relentless metronome counting down the moments of my autonomy. I felt a strange coldness spread through my chest. It wasn't anger. Not yet. It was a profound and terrible clarity, like a pane of glass sliding silently into place between me and them. I was not a person to them anymore. I was a portfolio of assets to be managed, problem to be solved, a house to be sold. I finally looked up and met David's eyes. I saw a flicker of something there. Impatience. He wanted me to agree, to cry, to argue. He wanted a reaction he could manage. I gave him none. I just nodded slowly. I picked up his plate and Susan's, the pie still sitting on them, a perfect, untouched monument to my effort. I walked to the trash can and scraped them clean. The sound of the good china against the metal rim was louder than a scream. They took my silence as acquiescence. Of course they did. My silence had always been their comfort. "Good," David said, relieved. "I'll have a realtor call you tomorrow. We'll handle everything." They left soon after that. A quick sterile kiss on my cheek from David. Pat on my arm from Susan. The front door clicked shut, and the sound of their car faded down the street. I stood in the kitchen for a long time. The ghost of the dinner was still there, but now it felt accusing. The house wasn't too big. My life wasn't too much. They were. Their expectations, their dismissiveness, their casual cruelty. That was what had become too big to bear. The grandfather clock chimed 7. Each chime was a note of defiance. I walked into the living room and sat in James's old velvet armchair. The fabric was worn smooth where his head used to rest. I could still smell him sometimes. a faint mix of Old Spice and the chicory coffee he loved. "Well, James," I whispered to the empty chair. "They want to sell our home." The silence that answered was not empty. It was full of our years together. Full of the unspoken promise we had made to live out our days right here. I had kept my end of the bargain. I closed my eyes, and in the quiet darkness of my own home, the house that was supposedly too big for me, an idea began to form. It was not a hot, angry idea. It was cool and clear and perfectly shaped. It was an idea that fit the moment exactly. It was an idea about legacy, about what this house truly meant. It wasn't an asset. It was a sanctuary. It had been my sanctuary, and now it could be a sanctuary for others. I opened my eyes. The coldness in my chest had been replaced by a steady, quiet fire. They thought I was a fragile old woman who needed to be put away. They were about to learn that the quietest people often have the most resolved minds. I would not be managed. I would not be simplified. And I would not be erased. The next morning, I did not wait for the realtor to call. I woke at dawn the way I always did. The house was quiet, filled with the soft gray light of a new day. I went through my rituals. I brewed a pot of strong chicory coffee, the way James liked it. I sat at the kitchen table and drank a cup, feeling the warmth spread through me. It was a warmth that came from a decision made. There was no hesitation in my heart. There was no doubt. The clarity of the previous night had solidified into a foundation. I took out a piece of paper, the good stationery I kept in the desk drawer, and a fountain pen. My hand did not tremble. I wrote a list. 1. Lawyer. 2. Bank. 3. Imani. Just 3 items. The blueprint for my new life. I did not look for the business card of the lawyer David had once recommended. A slick man in a shiny suit who specialized in estate planning, that always seemed to benefit the children more than the parents. I went to the phone book, a dusty relic I kept by the telephone stand in the hall. I ran my finger down the listings for attorneys. I was looking for a woman's name. I found one. Onyo Sharma. The advertisement was small, discreet. Probate wills and trusts. Protecting your legacy. I dialed the number. A calm voice answered. I made an appointment for the following day. "And what is the nature of the consultation, ma'am?" the receptionist asked. I paused, the words forming on my tongue clear and precise. "I am preparing to make a significant charitable donation," I said. And to revise my will, hanging up the phone felt like closing a door on my old life. Quiet, firm click. Next I went through the house. I walked from room to room, not with the sadness of departure, but with the purpose of an archivist. This was not just a house. It was a museum of a life well lived. I touched the pencil marks on the doorframe in the kitchen, charting David's growth from a toddler to a boy who towered over me. A pang of sorrow hit me sharp and quick. The boy I had loved was gone, replaced by the man who saw me as a burden. I let the sorrow come and then I let it go. It was a part of the story, but it was not the whole story. I went into the guest room, the room that used to be David's. 4 years I had kept it ready for him and Susan. Fresh linens on the bed. His old baseball trophies dusted on the shelf. In the closet were boxes of things I had saved for him. His christening gown. His first report card. Photographs of him with his father. Methodically, I began to pack these things away. I found a sturdy box in the attic. I folded the gown carefully. I stacked the report cards. I wrapped the trophies in newspaper. I was not angry. I was curating. I was separating my life from his. This was his history and he could have it. My future, however, was now my own. When I was done, I sealed the box and wrote his name on it in clear block letters. David. In my bedroom, I opened my jewelry box. Inside was the pearl necklace James had given me on our 25th anniversary. There were my mother's garnet earrings. And there was the engagement ring Susan had returned to me after the wedding, saying it was too old-fashioned. I had kept it, thinking one day she might change her mind, or perhaps Imani would want it. I took out the small velvet box containing the ring. I opened it. The diamond, small but full of fire, caught the morning light. It represented a promise of a family that had not materialized in the way I had hoped. I closed the box and put it aside. Some things were meant for a different story. Later that day, a text message arrived from David. "Realtor is calling you this afternoon. Her name is Brenda. Be nice. I read the message. The command. Be nice. As if I were a child who needed instruction on basic courtesy. As if my compliance was expected, my feelings irrelevant. I held my finger over the screen. For a moment I thought about replying. I thought about all the things I could say. Decades of unspoken frustrations bubbled up. But I didn't type a single word. Words were what they used. Words were what they twisted. My power was not in words. It was in action. It was in silence. I deleted the message. When the phone rang that afternoon and the caller ID displayed an unknown number, I let it ring. It rang 10 times before stopping. A few minutes later, a voicemail notification appeared. I did not listen to it. I deleted that too. The silence was a shield. It was a space I was carving out for myself. A space they could no longer enter without my permission. And I was not granting permission. That evening I made myself a simple dinner. A bowl of soup and a piece of cornbread. I ate at the small table in the breakfast nook, looking out at my garden. The gardenias were about to bloom. Their scent always reminded me of my mother. She used to say that a woman needed a garden to keep her soul steady. As I ate, I thought about the women who would come to this house next. Women who were running from something. Women who needed a safe place to land. I imagined them sitting here in this nook, drinking a cup of coffee and watching the gardenias bloom. I imagined their children playing in the backyard, their laughter chasing away the ghosts of my own family's neglect. The house wouldn't be empty. It would be fuller than it had been in years. The third item on my list was Imani, my granddaughter. She was David's daughter, but somehow she had escaped the chill that ran through his veins. She had my mother's eyes and my husband's compassionate heart. I called her the next morning before my appointment with the lawyer. Grandma. Her voice was warm, a balm on my frayed nerves. Is everything okay? Everything is fine, dear, I said. I was just wondering if you might be free to come for tea this weekend. Of course, she said immediately. Is Saturday good? I can bring some of those scones you like from the bakery. That would be lovely, I said. Just you though. Is that all right? There was a brief pause. I knew she understood the implication. Yeah, Grandma, she said softly. Just me. I'll be there. I hung up, feeling a sense of rightness. Imani needed to know. Not all of it, not the painful details. But she needed to know that my love for her was separate from the decisions I was making about the rest of the family. My love for her was a thing unto itself. A sturdy, well-tended plant in the garden of my heart. My appointment with Miss Sharma was at 10. I dressed carefully. I wore a navy blue dress, my good pearls, and the sensible low heels I saved for church. I was not a victim seeking pity. I was a woman of means and intention, conducting business. The lawyer's office was in a clean modern building downtown. It smelled of paper and quiet ambition. Miss Sharma was a woman about Susan's age, but her eyes held a depth and intelligence I had never seen in my daughter-in-laws. She was sharp, professional, and she listened without interruption. I laid out my plan simply. I told her about the house. I told her about my savings, my pension, the bonds James had left me. I told her I wanted to donate the house, fully paid for, to a specific local organization. The Haven, a shelter for women and children fleeing domestic abuse. A remarkable gift, Mrs. Henderson, she said, her expression unreadable but respectful. There are, of course, tax implications and legal structures we should discuss. A living trust might be the most effective instrument. I want to do it now, I said. I don't want to wait. We can begin the process immediately, she assured me. We'll also need to review any existing power of attorney documents. My son David has durable power of attorney, I said, the words tasting like ash. That will need to be revoked. Miss Sharma simply made a note on her legal pad. There was no judgment in her eyes, only professional focus. Understood. We can file a revocation immediately. And we will need to draft a new will to reflect your wishes. We spoke for over an hour. I outlined my desires clearly. My savings and investments were to be placed in a trust. Imani would be the sole beneficiary upon my death. Certain personal items, my mother's pearls, James's watch, the family Bible, were to be given to her directly. The rest of my personal property would be sold, with the proceeds going to the Haven. As for my son David, he is to be left $1. I said, my voice steady. To show he was not forgotten, but deliberately disinherited. Miss Sharma nodded. And the donation of the house? She asked. Is there any specific way you'd like it to be recorded? I took a deep breath. This was the heart of it. The final, quiet word in a conversation my son thought he had finished. Yes, I said. I want the donation to be made in his name. The David Henderson House for Women and Children. For the first time, Miss Sharma's professional mask slipped. A flicker of something, surprise? Admiration crossed her face. She recovered quickly. I see, she said, a hint of a smile playing on her lips. A living legacy. We can certainly arrange that. I left her office feeling lighter than I had in years. The city noise seemed distant. The sun felt warm on my face. I had taken the narrative of my life back into my own hands. My son wanted to be in charge of my legacy. Fine. I would give him one. He would be remembered in this town as a great philanthropist, the man whose name was on the shelter that saved women. He would have to drive past it. His friends would congratulate him. And he alone would know the truth. He would know it was a monument not to his generosity, but to his mother's resilience. The calls started that evening. First David, then Susan. I let the phone ring. The voicemails they left were a predictable blend of confusion and irritation. Mom, Brenda from the real estate office said you never answered. I told you she was calling. What's going on? Then Susan. Esther, we're just trying to help. You're not making this easy. Are you all right? Please call us back. We're getting worried. That word again. They weren't worried about me. They were worried about their plan. They were worried about their loss of control. Their concern was a hollow echo in a house that was now, finally, filled with my own purpose. I spent the next few days in a state of calm activity. I went to the bank and, with a letter drafted by Miss Sharma, removed David's name from my accounts. The bank manager, a young man named Mr. Peters, was discreet and efficient. He treated me with a deference and respect my own son no longer did. I sorted through decades of memories. I packed away photographs, letters, and trinkets. I created a small box for Imani, filled with pictures of her as a child, a locket from my mother, and a few of her grandfather's favorite books. The rest, the artifacts of a family that had fractured, I packed away for storage. I wasn't destroying the past. I was simply putting it in its proper place. I also paid a visit to the Haven. It was a modest building, clean but in need of repair. I met the director, a tired but fiercely dedicated woman named Maria. I didn't tell her my plan. I simply introduced myself as a potential volunteer and donor. I saw the women in the common room, their faces etched with fear and fatigue, but also with a glimmer of hope. I saw their children playing with worn-out toys. I saw the cramped kitchen where they prepared communal meals. And I knew with every fiber of my being that I was doing the right thing. My house, with its big kitchen and its sunny breakfast nook and its garden full of gardenias, was meant for them. It was a house built on love. And it would be a house that offered love and safety to those who needed it most. On Saturday, Imani arrived precisely at 2 o'clock. She carried a white bakery box tied with string. She looked worried. Her young face was a mirror of my own anxieties. "Grandma," she said, hugging me tightly. "What's going on? Dad is furious. He said you're not answering his calls. Let's have our tea first," I said, leading her into the kitchen. I had set the table with my best china, the pattern with the little blue flowers. I had made tiny cucumber sandwiches the way she liked them. The familiar ritual seemed to calm us both. We sat and sipped our tea. Imani nibbled on a scone. The silence between us was comfortable, not strained. Finally, she put her cup down. "He wants to sell the house, doesn't he?" she asked softly. I met her gaze. "Yes," I said. "He feels it's too big for me." Imani's eyes flashed with an anger that I had not allowed myself to feel. "That's not his decision to make," she said fiercely. "This is your home. This is Grandpa James's home." Tears pricked my eyes. To be seen. To be understood. It was a gift more precious than any house or any bank account. "I have made a decision, Imani," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "I am not selling the house. I am giving it away." I explained my plan. I told her about the Haven. I told her about the trust, and that she was to be my sole heir. I did not dwell on her father's cruelty. I did not need to. She saw it. She had always seen it. When I finished, she was crying silently. "I'm so sorry, Grandma," she whispered. "I'm so sorry they treated you like this." "It's not your apology to make, my dear," I said, reaching across the table to take her hand. "You have always been a joy to me. A light. This has nothing to do with you." "What will you do?" she asked. "Where will you go?" "I have my eye on a small apartment over by the park," I told her. 2 rooms. A little balcony for some pots of gardenias. It's all I need. Your grandfather and we didn't build this house just to have a big house. We built it to have a home. A place to start a family. The house did its job. Now it has a new job to do. She squeezed my hand. "And the name?" she asked, a small, wry smile touching her lips. "The David Henderson House? That's savage, Grandma." I smiled back. "I believe the Bible calls it reaping what you sow," I said. He wanted a legacy. Now he has 1 inch. We sat together for the rest of the afternoon, looking through old photo albums, telling stories about her grandfather. We laughed. For the first time in a long time, the house was filled with genuine warmth, not the hollow performance of a family gathering. It was a proper goodbye. The confrontation came the next day. Sunday. I had just returned from church when their car pulled into the driveway. They hadn't called. They knew I would be home. I met them at the door. I did not invite them in. I stood on the threshold, a queen at the gate of her castle. David's face was a thundercloud. Susan stood behind him looking pale and nervous. "What is this?" he demanded, waving his phone at me. "My lawyer just called me. He got a notice. You're revoking my power of attorney? You're setting up a trust? What the hell is going on, Mom?" His voice was loud. It carried across the manicured lawns of the quiet neighborhood. I did not raise mine. "I am managing my own affairs, David," I said calmly. "Managing your affairs? You went behind my back. After we agreed, we had a plan to take care of you. You had a plan to take care of yourselves," I corrected him gently. "You made a decision about my life without consulting me. You stood in my kitchen and told me my time here was over. I have simply made a different decision." Susan stepped forward. "Esther, please," she pleaded. "Don't be like this. We love you. We're just trying to do what's best." "What's best is for me to live my life with dignity," I said, my eyes fixed on my son. "What's best is for me to be seen as a person, not a problem. You told me this house was too big for one person. I agreed. So I am giving it to people who need it." David stared at me, his face a mask of disbelief and fury. The idea that I could or would do this was so far outside his comprehension that he was momentarily speechless. You're what?" he stammered. "I am donating this house to the Haven, the women's shelter," I said, my voice as clear and steady as a church bell. "It will provide a home for a dozen women and their children. A legacy of compassion. I'm naming it after you." The color drained from his face. He finally understood. He saw the shape of it. The terrible, beautiful, perfect justice of it. He saw a lifetime of his own selfishness reflected back at him in my calm, determined gaze. "You can't," he whispered. "This house. It's my inheritance," and there it was. The truth stripped bare of all its pretty lies about worry and care. It was never about me. It was about the money. It was about what he believed he was owed. "Your inheritance, David, was a mother's love," I said, and for the first time my voice trembled with the weight of all the years. "You have squandered it. This house is not your inheritance. It was my home. Now it will be a sanctuary. That is my choice. My final word on the matter." He stood there, gaping like a fish. He had no words. He had no arguments left. All his power, all his control, had evaporated on this sun-drenched porch. "Now if you'll excuse me," I said. "I have packing to do." I stepped back and slowly, deliberately closed the front door. I did not slam it. I closed it with the quiet finality of a chapter ending. I leaned against the cool wood, listening to the sound of my own breathing. I could hear their muffled voices outside, then the sound of a car door slamming, and finally, the engine roaring to life and fading away. And then there was only silence. The ticking of the grandfather clock. The hum of the refrigerator. The peaceful, steady rhythm of my own home. My own life. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of quiet, organized activity. Ms. Sharma handled the legal transfer of the property with formidable efficiency. Movers were scheduled. I found a lovely sunlit apartment on the third floor of a well-kept building near the library and the park. It had a small balcony, just big enough for a chair and a few pots of gardenias. Imani was my rock. She came over every evening after her classes. She helped me sort through 60 years of life, deciding what to keep, what to sell, what to give away. We approached the task not with sadness, but with a sense of purpose. We were not dismantling a home. We were preparing it for its next chapter. Some moments were hard. Packing away James's books, each one with his name written on the inside cover in his elegant script. Folding the handmade quilt my grandmother had made. The one I had wrapped a feverish young David in so many years ago. Each object was a memory, a tether to the past. But I was not severing the tethers. I was just loosening their hold on my present. Imani found the box I had packed for her father. "What should I do with this?" she asked, her voice soft. "Give it to him," I said. "It's his. He won't appreciate it," she said, her tone bitter. "That's not our concern," I told her, and I realized I meant it. We do our part. We love. We give. Whether the gift is received with grace is up to the recipient. There were no more calls from David or Susan. The silence from them was vast and absolute. I knew through Imani that the news of the donation had become public. The local paper had run a small story. Local businessman David Henderson facilitates major donation to women's shelter. I could only imagine his humiliation. The forced smiles as his colleagues congratulated him on his profound generosity. It was a private punishment played out on a public stage. The day I moved was bright and clear. The movers were strong and respectful, handling my possessions with care. As they emptied the house, its familiar rooms began to echo. The ghosts of laughter and arguments, of sickness and celebration, seemed to recede, making way for new spirits, new stories. Imani and I did a final walkthrough. The rooms were bare, clean, filled with sunlight. The house felt expectant, ready. "It's a good house," Imani said, her voice thick with emotion. "It was," I corrected her gently. "And it will be again." I handed her the keys to my new apartment. "Go on ahead," I said. "Get the kettle on. I'll be there in a little while. I want to say goodbye." She hugged me long and hard. "I love you, Grandma." "I love you too, my dear." When she was gone, I walked out the back door and into my garden. I ran my hand over the velvety petals of a blooming gardenia. I took one last deep breath of its sweet, familiar scent. I whispered a thank you to the house, to the land, to my James for the life we had lived here. Then I locked the back door, walked around to the front, and dropped the keys into the mailbox for Maria, the director of the Haven, to pick up. I did not look back. My new apartment was small, but it felt right. It was a space that was entirely my own. Imani had unpacked the essentials. The kettle was whistling on the stove. My worn velvet armchair, James's chair, sat by the window overlooking the park. We drank our tea. We watched the people strolling by below. The scale of my life had changed. It had shrunk in square footage, but it had expanded immeasurably in peace and dignity. I was no longer waiting for my children to call. I was no longer preparing Sunday dinners that would go uneaten. I was no longer a custodian of a past they didn't value. I was simply Esther Henderson, a woman in her own home. Life settled into a new gentle rhythm. I woke with the sun. I drank my coffee on my little balcony, tending to my new pots of gardenias. I went for walks in the park. I joined a book club at the library. I volunteered at the hospital, reading to children in the pediatric ward. My days were full but not busy. They were intentional. I saw Imani every week. Our bond, already strong, deepened into a beautiful friendship. She told me about her classes, her friends, her dreams. I told her stories about her grandfather, about growing up in the South, about the civil rights marches I had attended as a young woman. I was passing my legacy directly to her, the parts that truly mattered. One afternoon, about 6 months after I had moved, a letter arrived. The envelope was thick, expensive cream-colored paper. The return address was David's. My first instinct was to throw it away unopened. But curiosity, or perhaps a flicker of that old, stubborn maternal hope, stayed my hand. I opened it. It was a single page, filled with my son's familiar, cramped handwriting. "Mom," it began. "I don't know what to say. For months I have been angry. I have felt betrayed. I have told myself you were senile or spiteful or both. Susan and I told everyone that you had a sudden charitable impulse and we were just happy to support you in it. The lies taste like poison. Every time someone mentions the David Henderson house, I feel sick. They see a hero. I see myself. I see the man who stood in your kitchen and tried to evict his own mother. You didn't just give away a house, Mom. You gave me a mirror. And I hate what I see. I don't expect you to forgive me. I don't deserve it. But I wanted you to know that I finally understand. I have the box of my old things. I looked through it the other night. The report cards. The trophy. You saved everything. You saw me. And I stopped seeing you. I am sorry. For everything. David." I read the letter twice. I folded it and placed it on the table. The words were there. The apology I never thought I would receive. But they were just words on a page. They were a start, not an ending. I did not pick up the phone. I did not write back. Not yet. Forgiveness is not a switch you can flip. It is a garden that needs tending. It requires time and sunlight, and the hard work of pulling up weeds. He had planted a forest of weeds in my heart. It would take more than one letter to clear the ground, but for the first time I saw a possibility. A crack of light. A path to a new kind of relationship, one built not on obligation or inheritance, but on honesty and respect. A relationship that would have to be entirely on my terms. I looked around my small, peaceful apartment. The late afternoon sun streamed through the window, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. The scent of gardenias drifted in from the balcony. My teacup was warm in my hands. I was whole. I was at peace. I was home. The future was unwritten. And for the first time in a very long time, I was the one holding the pen.